Alright, ladies and gents, we have taken off the rear diff cover, put some new gear oil on it, and resealed it with a 10.5 gasket cover that we've had sitting on a shelf for many years now. But still works, so that's good to go. We also put some new trans fluid in the transfer case, so it's good to go. Most of this is just maintenance items, because we didn't know how many miles any of this fluid had on it, so transfer case is good to go. We also put one of the FDID pans like we put on the transmission that we rebuilt on here. And now, as you can see, we also put the autometer temp sensor and where the drain plug goes. Not what we usually do, but to save time, that's what we did. And if you want to put one of these pans on a four-wheel drive, you're gonna have to take out the two bolts that hold the trans mount to the transmission and move the cross member backwards and support the back with the jack. There's also two bolts back there by the transfer case that holds the tail shaft of the transfer case up. So that part's good to go. Which is the reason why you have to do that, is that way you can get to the back bolts on the pan, because even stock there's not a whole lot of room to get back there. Also put some new gear oil in the front diff, which is like honey, because it's the thickest stuff I think the auto parts store had. So every fluid under here is good to go. Actually, every fluid in the truck should be good to go, now that I think about it. Hey y'all, it's not the Cleveland show.
Nope.
It's the Cardboard Creeper Garage show. And there's a truck going up the road.
There always is, every time you go to film.
Yep.
Johnny Farmer.
Anyhow.
Loud truck decides to...
So, if you recall from last ventures, we had the HP tuners hooked up to the black box, and the code was a code for knock sensor bank 1 circuit low. Well, there is not just one oxygen, or not oxygen sensor, God, now you got me doing it. Knock sensor. There's one on the passenger side, one on the driver's side, which we did not know. We thought it was just one, but after looking at diagrams and actually checking out the truck, there's one way down there. If you see that blue wire coming up, I'm not sure how well you can tell, but
it's there.
It's there.
We know it's there. Trust us. We would never lie.
And as you can see, there's also a very botched up wiring job going, because this wire here is for the one on the passenger side.
That isn't even in the factory loom.
Yeah.
We saw that a while back.
Which we're actually going to keep it that way because it's significantly easier.
Well, rather than trying to go through the factory loom, which is buried under
everything,
a considerable amount of stuff, we are actually going to redo this wire and run it across the top of the
and then we're going to splice it into this one.
Powers the other fuse box.
Yeah.
Just to make life easier. But we also came to find out that the sensor on the driver's side, there was no plug.
Yeah. Which luckily, since we're hoarders and we have the wiring harness from my Vortec engine, connector fits on there, so we just chop the wire off, and then we're going to splice it into a wire up here. Obviously much more pretty.
Yes.
But
we're going to run two new wires.
Yeah, one from the passenger side over here, and then splice it into these two into the PCM, which this is the wire for said knock sensor. They didn't have two individual knock sensor wires, they just spliced them into one. For what reason? Who knows?
And just to paint a picture here, the reason why we're doing this is because when we were running live data, when it was running, we noticed that there was no changes to the knock sensor, and for some reason, when you drive it down the road, it just feels very, very lazy. So, and it shouldn't feel as lazy as it does. So, we're just trying to fix things that we know are a problem, and hopefully, one of these days, we'll figure out what's going on with it. It's like the best damn zip tie I've ever seen.
Off topic. Kind of. We got a new trouble code, which is for P0401 EGR low something. Flow or something to that effect.
It's a pretty popular one.
Yeah. So we just tuned out said code, so there's no mill. So fixed.
Yeah, because there's a kink in the tube over there that comes off the manifold.
Let me see if I can get in on that.
And
right there.
There could be some carbon buildup underneath the valve, which we did order a gasket, and whenever it shows up, we'll pull the valve off and just check that to make sure. So it's not like we tuned out the EGR, we just got rid of that code. It's still functioning, so don't hate.
Anyhow, coming back to this, so as we said, we're going to run it with this red wire that's coming here, but we're also getting rid of this amp wire that was hooked up to nothing and just laying there, which wasn't hooked up to the battery either, and I don't think there's even a fuse in the case, but yeah, so we'll come back with you later and stuff.
Right now we're undoing things that were done.
Yeah.
Alright, so we pulled the PCM out of here because the blue wire that connects to the knock sensors, as you can see, has been altered somewhere at some time by definitely not a GM approved connector, but
or anything approved.
In order, since this wire is so short, what I'm going to do is finish tearing this apart, pull the wire out of the connector, put an actual decent connector on here and seal it up so we have a lot more wire to deal with to connect the new wire that's coming from this one, which there wasn't one, and we rewired the one from the other side to connect all these. So we'll get back to you in a minute here.
For anyone that's curious, yes, we did the right thing and disconnected the battery.
Okay, we left off last night. It was getting dark and starting to get cold.
It still is cold.
But yeah, today's actually worse than it was last night. But we just got done finishing wiring everything up. So what we did is the knock sensor on this side, the wire is now in loom, comes up here.
And see that little loop down there, if you can see the loom.
And on this truck, the external fuse box is over there, and there's a hot wire that goes from the battery over there to power it. So what we did was ran it with that wire in a new piece of loom that was a little better sized for this.
And then down to here, and then where you can see that crappy electrical tape job, but it works. And you have the wire coming out of the PCM that runs with this, with the other wire for the driver's side knock sensor, which goes like right, I'm not sure if you can see it.
Somewhere down in there.
But then it comes up around the steering shaft and then up here, and then the two wires for the PCM and the driver's side knock sensor meet, and we just have the one going in the other end of the butt connector. And we tested resistance and all checked out.
Resistance, we have voltage. So now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up the laptop and see if we're getting any readings from said knock sensors, because we weren't previously.
Yes.
So we'll be back to you in a minute.
Alright, we ran some data through HP tuners, and we're getting a bunch of random misfires on not just one cylinder, but pretty much every cylinder. I mean, even at idle, it's misfiring. I mean, even just at 2 grand sitting still, not under any sort of load, it's misfiring. So we're not replacing the coil, but I just wanted to inform you, we're replacing the cap, the rotor, and the wires. And to get the cap out, the way that GM designed this is bolts to the back of the intake, and it covers up the cap. And even with that off, it's still pretty tight back there because there's an AC line and the wiring harness and stuff, but we'll get there. And the plugs you're seeing is for that spark control and the coil. I hope that would be obvious, but you never know. Okay, so after watching another guy on YouTube that replaced his distributor cap on his 7.4, the front screw is essentially impossible to get to because it's pretty much underneath the plenum almost. So what he had to do, and what we kind of thought of, was loosen the distributor and go, and then you can get to the screw. Okay, cap rotor off. Base of the distributor looks alright, but I do want to show you some comparing between the new parts and the old parts. Okay, so the one to the left is new, the one to the right is old. Now, if you go like this, you can definitely see the difference there. This is springy, like it should be. This one, the button on it is pushed down. I am assuming that's a problem, because it's not making contact with the center point in the distributor. And if you look at the end here, you can definitely see there's some wear at the tip of the, I guess, electrode you'd call it, I don't know. It makes contact with the points inside the cap. Now, Let's look at the new cap versus old cap. So, old cap doesn't look that old, but you can see weird, it has whiteness on the ends, and the ends just don't look as flat as they're supposed to be, because compared to this one, they're pretty much just flat. But the cap itself doesn't look horrible, but it definitely was getting wore. So, changing it anyway. Alright, so I started plug wiring on this side, and they're pre-made wires, and they fit really well in the holders and stuff. That's just said you don't have the things that clip over top to hold them in because someone broke them, which is pretty common, I think, because they don't like to come apart. But they're all wired in. So this side's finished. Okay, still got to do the other side, but yeah, cap rotor's on, and
much later.
What you doing, Ethan?
well, this EGR tube that is usually a pain for most people, somehow, and I'm assuming someone has had this apart before, came right apart.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing, but it's not usual.
So now we can keep on rolling.
Yeah.
Because we got a lot of stuff to tear apart. And
we're called Cardboard Creeper Garage, but right now I'm using a topside Creeper Garage.
we're not changing our name.
Yes. Oh, for this episode we are.
No, we're still not changing our name.
Many wire connector and bolts later, upper plenum's off, and we figured out that this very front injector is just puking gas, as we had jumped the fuel pump relay. And now what I'm going to do is pull the distributor out, and then I'm going to disconnect some fuel lines, so that way I can pull the whole rail out, and then we'll keep these moving forward after that.
Alright, so Ethan was able to get the fuel rail off, and we found some interesting things. First of all, whomever was in here at one point in time and removed these injectors apparently didn't do a very good job of it and broke some of the tabs off because everything's zip tied together. Not really what you want to see. And then we also found that the number 2 injector wasn't even engaged in here the complete way, so whenever you jumped the fuel pump and made it run, not only was it puking out the fuel rail, but it was also leaking out here as well. So and I'm noticing as I'm looking at these, some of them, the clips are not locked in, like that one for instance is not. Some of these are locked in, but I'm going to go through this whole rail, clean everything up, because this part unfortunately is discontinued, so I'm going to have to stick with the zip tie method apparently and hope for the best. So just a word of caution, anybody that's tearing these injectors apart, all you got to do is use one of these little screwdrivers and just take your time and just work them off, and they will slide right up off, and you won't not break any of this stuff. So anybody out there that's doing this job, just take your time. Don't break stuff. It's annoying.
I didn't have to take the valve cover off, but it looks nice and clean inside there, because I'll admit it, I missed an intake bolt, but it was underneath a whole bunch of stuff and I didn't really see it. But the intake should come off now, so I'll be back with you in a minute. Well, intake's off, and other than the dirt that I could have knocked down in here whenever I took it off, it's really clean in there. Same, like I said, with the valve train in the head. So I'm going to clean mating surfaces, and I'm going to change the oil pressure sensor. It's way back there too, because we bought a whole bunch of things to change before we put all of it together, because once the intake's back on here, there's hardly any room back there to get to anything. So see you guys in a bit. Okay, I've cleaned mating surfaces for the intake manifold, and in the meantime, Johnny had cleaned the valley plate thing and the fuel rail, and now you're setting up to do a pulse test on the injectors.
Yeah, and clean them out.
That too.
And we've got a new fuel regulator in here now.
Right.
And I put a metal zip tie on here because finding one of these things is like finding a unicorn. And if you do, they're super expensive. So we're just going to fix this one.
So, be back with you whenever we're doing testing stuff.
Alright, so the fuel rail is now reassembled. Got a new regulator. We ran all the injectors through a cleaning process. Bought this little kit from Amazon. Actually works out pretty well. And instead of using plastic zip ties, which through heat cycles and stuff they tend to get brittle, I actually used header wrap ties because we had like a whole crap load of them, and I think they'll hold up better. Now, understanding when this is bolted in the truck, I understand the injector really ain't going to go anywhere, but it just gives me more of a peace of mind. So, and finding one of these things, yeah, they're on eBay for anywhere from $200 to $400. So.
Yeah, so if you have a Gen 6 454 and it's blown up, you can make bank off of it. Yeah.
So, all right. So that's that.
Well, we got China rails, walls, whatever you want to call them. Great Wall of China set up. And intake gaskets are stuck to the head. So momentarily after this sets up for a minute, I'm going to slap the intake on it. All intake bolts have gotten Loctited with blue Loctite in the manifold as the Haynes manual specifies for this. So now I have the pattern here and we're going to start. That is also true. Now I have the pattern here in the Haynes manual for the torque pattern, and it's going to start with 22 foot-pounds, and then the second step is going to be 30 foot-pounds. So I'll be back with you here in just a second. Injector rail is back on and connected, and fittings are tight, and we jump the fuel pump relay over there, make the pump run, and there is no leaks whatsoever because as before the number 2 injector was leaking because it wasn't all the way in the rail, and now it's nice and dry. So now I'm going to move on to putting the distributor back in, and then after that I believe it's going to move on to upper plenum. Okay, and just like that, everything is now ready for the upper plenum portion to go on. So get back with you when it's time to start torquing bolts and it's back in place. Again. The plenum is set in place and the bolts need Loctited, and then they are ready to go on with this sequence with 71 inch-pounds as the first pass, and then 13 foot-pounds as the second pass. Well, way in the future, wiring connectors are they're all done. I'm currently in the process of putting the AC compressor back on, but the thermostat gooseneck is back on, and that one heater hose that goes way back there is reconnected. So all I have left to do is reconnect that air intake duct, run the throttle cables back across, and MAF sensor. And then reconnect some hoses and put the coolant in it.
All right, Ethan, let's show us your hard work.